Gambia, top state secret. The Gambia is another Rwanda in West Africa. Secret killings documented under dictator Jammeh's 21-year misrule. It was on November 11, 1994, when former Gambian Army Captain Basiru Barrow, a native of Jara Barrow Kunda, drove from his home in Bakate, to meet with his coup plotters at the Yundum military barracks. Mr. Barrow arrived at the camp around midnight. He alighted from his car, and walked towards the guardroom. His first remark to his men on duty was, "Gentlemen, are you ready for it?" In response, the soldiers said, "Yes sir, we are ready." Base Barrow. Little did Captain Basiru Barrow knew that the former junta defense minister and vice chairman Captain Edward Singh Gate, and his men have already laid down an ambush for him. Barrow walked past Captain Singh Gate, who was hiding around the vicinity of the guardroom. Mr. Singh Gate walked behind him and then grabbed him by the back. Barrow was carrying a black briefcase at the time. The briefcase contained the coup operational information, including the list of officers associated with the coup. There was also a pistol concealed in the briefcase. When Captain Edward Singh Gate subdued, overcome, Captain Barrow had no alternative but to drop his briefcase. He was now at the mercy of his captives. One of Captain Singh Gate's former bodyguards, Bach Samba Jallo, a native of Farato, remarked after the capturing of Barrow, "Sir, let me finish him." Mr. Jallo was told wait. Barrow was subsequently handcuffed, and then detained at a cell next to the guardroom. Mr. Barrow was later transported to the Fajura barracks to join his accused coup plotter ex-lieutenant Abdulli Fall, aka Fall. Fall was arrested after the barracks was taken over by soldiers loyal to the junta. Fall hailed from Balen Agar. We will discuss Barrow's execution later in this masterpiece. Fajura barracks came under attack. FAAL. Like all abortive coups, the November 11, 1994, coup also leaked before the execution of the coup. Abdulli Fall was the adjutant of the Fajura camp. Fall and his men were on standby for the execution of the coup. A plan was strategized by Barrow, Fall and his men to use certain uneducated soldiers posted at the Fajura barracks to man the key security installations within the barracks on the night of the planned coup. They told the men that the command received an intelligence that the barracks was likely to be attacked by mercenaries loyal to former President Jawara. That the mercenaries could be white men and the barracks should be defended if such an attack takes place. Barrow and Fall knew very well what they were doing. Prior to the foiling of the coup, junta officials, Edward Singh Gate, Yankuba Turi, Sadabu Haidara, Sana Sabali, and CO visited both Yundum and Fajura barracks respectively to warn soldiers not to venture into any attempt to topple the existing administration at the time. Yahya Fande, a cook, was stationed at the flagpole of the barracks. Pierre Mendy, also a cook, cum school dropout, was stationed at the same location, while the rest of the soldiers were stationed in other strategic locations of the barracks. Guards led by Yunus Berry entered through the back gate of the Fajura barracks. Yunus was armed with a portable grenade. He fired shots in the area. Former junta official Edward Singh Gate also led some men to ambush the barracks. Edward's men arrested Yahya Fande and Pierre Mendy, both cooks at the Fajura barracks. When the junta's loyal forces hit the gate, they met Alassane Genet, a former gendarmerie officer. He fired his weapon at the loyal forces. Genet, too, was arrested after he was overpowered by Edwards's guards. When soldier Yahya Fande, Pierre Mendy and Alassane Genet were questioned, they told guards led by Edward that they were told by their superiors that the camp was going to be attacked. They were subsequently released. After taking over the camp, Fall was arrested. Mr. Fall was undressed. He only had a boxer short on him. Fall was paraded in front of the commander's office, where he was subjected to humiliating and brutal beatings before his execution. Both Peter Singh Gate and his brother Edward Singh Gate were present at the time of Mr. Fall's execution. Also present at the execution of Fall was the ex-junta vice-chairman Sana Bayro Sabali, and the former Interior Minister Said Buhaidara. Fall was shot at close range either by Peter, or his brother Edward. Before his execution. Fall remarked, "You cannot kill me. You cannot kill me." Despite Fall's repeated noise that he should not be killed, that never stopped Edward and his men from executing him in grand style. Fall even defecated himself before meeting his tragic death. Mr. Fall's remains was put on board a vehicle with the registration number, GNA 111. Basiru Barrow was the first officer to be executed. Base Barrow Basiru Barrow was the first to be killed at the Fajura barracks. Like Fall, Barrow was killed in front of the commander's office. Barrows lost all his teeth during the beatings. Over 10 soldiers were assembled to shoot him. Council members' orderlies were among those assigned to execute Barrow. Sana Bayro Sabali's orderlies were among those who took part in the killing of Basiru Barrow. Among them was 1 N.J. Ponkal. Ponkal now works at the training school. Another orderly named in the killing of Barrow was B.A.G. Mr. G now works at the Army Headquarters Finance Department. Ceesay Fati, a former orderly attached to Edward Singh Gate, also took part in the killing of Barrow. Ceesay has since left the army. SUSO1 Al-Fuzaini Ceesay, a former orderly of the late Said Buhaidara, was also on the ground on the day in question. Ceesay now lives in Europe. He is from Kunda. Ceesay's late brother was also in the army. He was shot and killed along the beach. Some soldiers. He was chilling with his girlfriend, when soldiers patrolling the beach side opened fire on them. Before he was finally executed after losing his tooth, Basiru Barrow remarked, "I have 2 wives. Please spare my life. You can jail me if you want." Sana Sabali responded, "Don't worry about them." After killing Barrow and Fall, their assassins were not comfortable collecting their remains. In fact, everyone who witnessed the killings was a bit afraid to grab the corpses of Barrow and Fall. November 11 was a turning point in the annals of the Gambia National Army. Men in uniform killed their colleagues in grand style. Pierre Mendy, a cook, was among those who collected the corpses and put them in the truck. Barrow and were killed at 7 a.m. They were killed on a Friday. The bodies of Barrow and Fall were transported to the Yundum barracks. Council members and officers converged at the Yundum barracks. Yanks Toure, former council member. The officers converged at the ant room at the Yundum barracks. At the time, all those whose names were featured on the list that Barrow provided to the arresting team, have been arrested with the exception of Basiru Kamara, and Amadou Kebet, a Banjalian. Kebet now works with a security company in the Gambia. He was shot on the leg during the course of his arrest. He was not killed. Kebet was shot by Peter Singh Gate. He was shot at the Fajura barracks, just outside the clinic. Information later reached the arresting team that Basiru Kamara was spotted in Brikama. He was pursued. Kamara was spotted around the Brikama market area. He tried to hide, but he was arrested. He was placed in Peter Singh Gate's official Toyota Corolla car. He was put in the trunk. Peter was not around then. He was taken to Yundum and detained in a cell. Fafa Nyang is a former army sergeant instructor. He is from Balangar. His wife Fatou Sow works at the Islamic Bank. Fafa was living at the Yundum barracks with his wife and family before his arrest and subsequent execution. Mr. Nyang was arrested at his room at the camp. He was arrested by Manlay Phi Corr, now deceased. Corr, too, was killed in the aftermath of the 2006 March abortive. He was killed together with Daba Marina, the former NIA chief, RSM Alpha Ba, Lieutenant Ebolo, and Lieutenant Alihu Ceesay. The late Manlay Phi Corr escorted Fafa Nyang to the ant room for interrogation. Ant room is next to the signals unit of the Yundum barracks and cook house. Mr. Nyang was questioned by Edward, Peter, Said Buhaidara, and Co-Edu, conducted the majority of the questioning. When Fafa Nyang arrived at the ant room, he was dressed in a camouflage trouser, and a mixed-color shirt. He was putting on a slip pass. When questioned by Edward Singh Gaite, Fafa Nyang said in the Wolof dialect, "Hai manduma di flalu," meaning in English, "I will not engage in such activities." Nyang was beamed in smiles, while laughing at the same time. He never knew that he was about to be killed by Edward's men. He was told by Edward, "Fucking move out." Edu, then told the arresting team, "Get him." When Fafa Nyang came out of the ant room, he was told by Edward and his men, "Go and meet your friends and greet them." The bodies of Fall and Basiru Barrow were on board the truck GNA 111 at the time. Mr. Nyang tried to climb on the truck, and upon seeing the bodies of and Barrow, he could not resist the situation. He suddenly fell down. He then stand again. Edward Singh Gaite remarked again, "Get him." There were many armed soldiers around. Among them, it was only one soldier, who participated in the killing of Fafa Nyang. His name is Lamin Kali. Kali fired the shot that killed Fafa Nyang. He was a lance corporal at the time of killing Nyang. Fafa was shot on the back by Lamin Kali. Kali works with the army medic at the Medical Reception Station, MRS, in Yundum Barracks. Kali still works at Yundum. He is a senior NCO. After killing Fafa Nyang, Kali also fell on the ground. He was putting on a lot of jujus at the time. The soldiers came to his aid. The jujus were removed and he later regained consciousness. Fafa Nyang was killed on a Friday after 11 o'clock in the morning. Sana Sabauli then went to Radio 1 FM, George Christensen's radio station, to announce the failed coup on the same day, Friday. Sana claimed among other things that some of the coupists lost their lives during the shootout. Sana Sabauli visited the Yundum barracks on a Saturday. Sanawan Sanna Sabauli came to the Yundum barracks on a Saturday, accompanied by his fellow council members. He was dressed in mufti. He had a handheld walkie-talkie radio. Sana then gave an order that all the detainees in the cells should be brought outside. The detainees were taken out from their cells. Sana then said, "Tied them up. We are going to kill them and dump them somewhere." Among the soldiers, taking part in tying up of the soldier detainees was WO1 Papu Gomez. He is now a colonel in the army. Papu works at the Joint Services headquarters. He smacked one of the detainees and then remarked, "Even my daughter's buttocks is bigger than yours." After tying them up, Pap Gomez and CO placed the detainees in a Land Rover, and placed barbed wire on them. The captives started bleeding as a result of barbed wire placed on their bodies. 7 of them were in the car. Basiru Kamara, Ebrima, Ceesay were not in the car at this time. When they drove past Nyambia forest, blood started dropping on the road. Someone notified the convoy that blood was dropping from Land Rover. The individual concerned advised Papu Gomez and his men to change road. The original destination was at the Brikama firing range. The convoy then diverted to the Sifo bushes. An order was given to cut some leaves and place it in the Land Rover. The Land Rover was cleaned in an attempt to avoid any blood trail. Among the detainees in the Land Rover were Lieutenant Ba, alias Chopin; Lieutenant Bakery Manette, alias Nyancho, a MAND Inca officer from Nuimi; Lieutenant Buba Jamet, from Nuimi, also a MAND Inca officer. He gave his new black watch to Lamarana Jallo, a former orderly, before he was killed. Buba Jamet has just returned from an overseas officers' training before the November 11 abortive coup. Cadet Silla, another MAND Inca officer from Nuimi. Lieutenant Gibril Say, a weapon expert from Sarakunda. He was living in Banjolnding before he was killed. The remaining 2 captives, we are yet to establish their names. At the Sifo bushes, the catchword for the killings was, "Run for your lives." The detainees were being called one after the other by their names. The late Saidabu Haidara, was the one tasked to call the names of the officers to be executed. The detainees couldn't run, despite being asked by Ceesay to run for their lives. More than 10 armed soldiers, mainly consist of orderlies assigned to the council members, were present at the execution ground in Sifo. Corporal Alhaji Kanyi, a native of Songkoya, and one Pa Sunet, from Kartong, a provost, also joined the executioners in the bushes of Sifo. Kanyi also served as a provost during his military career. The following people took part in the killing of the officers mentioned above. Corporal Alhaji Kanyi, Private Pa Sunet, Omar Sunko, a Hoya from Fanai Bullock. He now works at the central bank as a security guard. G. Ponkal, who now works at the Army Training School at the Fajura Barracks. DAG, Warrant Officer Class 2. DAG now works at the Army Headquarters Finance and Records Department. Sisaho Fati, former Army Private. Tumbul Tamba, then Army Corporal, now deceased. Lamin Fati Lance Corporal Lamin Fati, from SA. He was among of Edward Singh Gaitaya's orderlies. JCB Mini, Sana Sabali's orderly. He was one of the deadliest among Sana's orderlies. He was working as a security guard at the Karaba Hotel in 2011. Something dramatic occurred at the execution ground. Cadet Silla, one of the captured officers lined up to be killed, made a remark before he was executed: "If you are going to kill me, take the heaviest weapon." Cadet Silla also recited the Quran before he was executed. Sana Sabali was touched by Silla's Islamic recitation. Sana appeared very frightened. He walked towards Ceesay Haidara, and tried to prevail on Haidara to spare Silla's life. But Ceesay wouldn't listen to him. Haidara told Sana, "Hey, the army alone is another Quran." Silla was shot at a close range. He subsequently died. Lieutenant Bakari Manek cried at the execution ground in Sifo. He begged for forgiveness. His repeated pleas fell into deaf ears. He was subsequently killed. Lieutenant Gibril Say, a native of Sarakunda, left his home and reported to work at Yundum. Say walked into the Yundum barracks in the morning by himself. He had the army's reference book called Aide Memoire. He was in uniform. He was told that he was under arrest. He remarked, "What have I done?" He was escorted to the guardroom. His aide memoire was also taken from him. He was undressed and placed in the cell. Mr. Say was among the officers taken to the Sifo bushes for execution. Mr. Say told his killers before his execution that, "You people are cowards. If you are men, and brave, why tying our legs?" No one answered him. Say died as a brave officer. He was killed. It would be recalled that in the aftermath of the November 11, 1994, abortive coup, Mr. Say's biological father visited the office of the late Junta Interior Minister Ceesay Haidara, to ask him about his missing son. Mr. Haidara flatly denied having knowledge about Say's whereabouts. It turns out that it was Haidara who was supervising the execution of the Say and CO at the Sifo bushes, escorting the remains of the executed officers to Yundum. Ceesay Haidara, driver of the Land Rover Ousman Jabai, from Jaratonia Taba, could not drive the vehicle on his way back to Yundum. He suffered from a seizure. The former CD's Babukar Jada even advised Jabai to seek some spiritual prayers. Jada was present during the killings. Ansumana died of TB years later. Just for the records, Ansumana Jabai never killed anyone. The bodies of the executed officers were placed in the Land Rover, while barbed wire was used to cover the corpses. There were leaves also placed on the remains of the executed officers. This was on a Saturday evening. The bodies were taken to the Yundum barracks. The bodies were dumped in a new-built pit latrine at Yundum, not far from the cook house. The aforementioned officers were buried in the said pit latrine. Mbub 180 this time, Basuru Kamara and M. Ceesay were still kept in the cells at Yundum. They were to be executed next. 1 Babukar Mbub, a former lance corporal, also a native of Endogu Kebet, and Alhaji Kanyi escorted Ceesay and Camara from their cells. Mbub is believed to be residing in the United States. Kanyi lives in the Gambia. Mbub and Kanyi allegedly killed the two detainees, Basiro Camara and Ceesay, a native of Kor. Basiro Camara came from Jara Pakalindang. Ex-soldier Babukar Mbub, alias Babu Kodu, lives in New York, in the Bronx. He is from number 56, Lancaster Street, Banjul. That's the family home of Musa Mbub, the former Inspector General Police. He is from Ndungu Kebet, and not Balangar. He graduated from the Banjul City Council Secondary School, BCC. Read between the lines, you will find Mr. Mbub in a joint portrait with dictator Yahya Jammeh, Landing 13 Badja and others. Interesting revelations. Basiro Camara and Ceesay were assembled at the Yundum pit latrine and shot at close range by Mbub and Kanyi. Mbub is heavily built. They were buried together with the officers, who were executed in Sifo. Alhaji Kanyi's involvement in the November 11, 1994, abortive coup. Kanyi to a Tuesday before the November 11, abortive coup, Alhaji Kanyi, then Corporal Kanyi, was seen at the Yundum barracks field waiting for the soldiers under his unit to arrive for him to lecture them on military tactics. Kanyi was a section commander at the time. There was a blackboard positioned at the field. This is where soldiers in Yundum receive their daily lectures. Kanyi was holding a chuck at the material time. Kanyi was also under Gibril Say's command company. Say was his company sergeant major. Mr. Kanyi confided to some of his colleagues in the army that they were plotting to remove the military council headed by Yahya Jammeh. "Don't you know that we coming to remove this council?" Kanyi asked one of his colleagues. He was advised to stay away from the planned coup. Kanyi and the coup organizer Basiru Barrow both hailed from Jera. One of his colleagues even told him that the coup had already leaked and that Edward Singh Gate and other council members were supposed to visit Yundum to address the soldiers. Interestingly, Sana Sabauli confronted Kanyi and told him that they, the council members, heard that he, Kanyi, was part of the coup. Mr. Sabauli also told Kanyi to prove himself, his innocence, if he thinks that he was not complicit to the plot to overthrow the junta. Kanyi has indeed proven himself to Sabauli. He volunteered to be part of the team that executed Cadet Silla, Say and others. He stabbed Say in the stomach with his bayonet. Mbub 3 on Saturday, immediately after killing Say and others, Kanyi participated on a Remembrance Day match pass on Sunday, held at the McCarthy Square, now known as the July 22 ND Square. Kanyi is a very good driller. He likes to partake in drill exercises. When Kanyi returned to the Yundum camp on Saturday, after the massacring of the arrested officers, Kanyi was somehow unconscious. He seems to have lost his mind. The ghost of the executed officers tormented him throughout the night. He could not sleep that night. Junta Council member Edward Singh Gate even offered to give Kanyi some money to buy alcohol so that he can relax his mind, but Kanyi told him that he would be fine. It should be noted that Alhaji Kanyi had developed grudges against one of the executed officers, Lieutenant Gibril Say. Say was his field instructor and platoon sergeant at the Kudang camp. Kanyi was a lance corporal at the time. Mbub 2Kanyi later got promoted to the rank of sergeant, while Gibril Say was commissioned to the rank of lieutenant. In the meantime, Kanyi continues to work under Say's company at Yundum. Kanyi had a history of absenteeing himself from work, AWOL, and reporting to work while under the influence of alcohol. He is an alcoholic. Lieutenant Say demoted Kanyi from the rank of sergeant to private. This was well before the July 22, 1994 coup. When the November 11 coup failed, Kanyi saw it as an opportunity to avenge his anger against his former commander Gibril Say. The rest is now history. Events leading to the November 11 coup. Base BARROW. The November 11 failed coup was triggered by growing disenchantment among of the officers of the then Gambia National Army. The junta made unfulfilled promises to the soldiers. Among the unfulfilled promises include the introduction of risk allowances for all soldiers across the board, to change the terms and conditions of the arm, among other promises. None of the promises were fulfilled. On Wednesday, Edward, Yankuba Turali, and Saidabu Haidara came to the Undam camp. A meeting was held at the recreation hall. Edward fired in the air. Edu then remarked, "You see, we all have guns. If you don't change your minds, we will not change our minds. We are all one." He called on the soldiers to be patient. Someone in the crowd bullied Edward. Mr. Ceesay tried to identify the person who bowed him, but to no avail. He couldn't identify the person in question. Finance Minister Koro Ceesay's murder. Koro's killers hours before the former Finance Minister Ousman Koro Ceesay was murdered. Junta Defense Minister Edward Ceesay summoned some soldiers at his residence. The soldiers were called to report to the assembly area, at Edward's home. In the army, it is known as ASSY area. Among the soldiers who showed up at Edu's home include Sergeant Lamin Fati, Edu's orderly Batch Samba Jallo, and Alhaji Kanyi. Sifo, a former gendarmerie officer, was on guard at Ceesay's home at the material time. Sifo now works with the NIA. Days before the mission to kill Ousman Koro Ceesay was executed, Alhaji Kanyi confided to his trusted colleagues in the army that a state minister was about to be killed. Kanyi, who appeared disgruntled, complained that the junta was using him for their own selfish interest. That he, Kanyi, was often sidelined in times of parties and good time by the junta. He felt that he was not being fairly rewarded by the junta. Alhaji Kanyi did not reveal the name of the minister, who was lined up to be killed. Sadly, the following day, Finance Minister Ousman Koro Ceesay was killed. His remains were dumped in his official Benz car and set ablaze by his killers. Ousman Koro Ceesay was among the officials who showed up at the airport to bid farewell to dictator Yahya Jammeh, who was traveling to Ethiopia at the material time. Koro was lured into the home of Yankuba Turali, a former junta council member. He was invited for a meeting at Yankuba's home. Present at the meeting was Edward Ceesay, Yankuba Turali, Koro Ceesay himself, and the team assigned to take out Koro. This was few days before Koro was going to present his budget speech to the nation. Koro had a disagreement with Yahya Jammeh and his council members over the content of his budget speech. Koro had mentioned in his budget speech that the junta members compensated themselves financially for overthrowing Jawara's government. It was an unspecified amount of money that Jammeh, Edward, Yankuba, and Co dipped from the state coffers. Koro Ceesay felt that the Gambian people deserved to know how much money was spent and acquired from financial institutions since the junta came to power. This decision of Koro never went down well with the junta. Despite numerous forewarnings not to include the money that the junta paid themselves for overthrowing Jawara's government in his budget speech, Koro never heeded. He was still determined to inform Gambians what actually transpired financially that year. While at Yankuba Turali's home, Koro was asked if he had a copy of his budget speech, and he replied in the affirmative. Upon going through the document, the junta council members present at the meeting discovered that Koro has not amended the budget speech as advised. The guards were given orders to liquidate Koro. Koro was manhandled and killed in cold blood. He was hit with a baseball baton by one of the assassins. After killing Koro, his body was put on board his official car. The car was driven to a nearby hilly place outside Jambour, where it was set ablaze by Peter Ceesay, Soldier Lamin Fati, Batch Samba Jallo, Alhaji Kanyi, and others. Petrol was poured on Koro's car and set ablaze. The minister was burnt to ashes with his official car. Peter Ceesay was nearly consumed by the fire. Peter even sustained burns on his hand. OJ and other PPP officials tortured. PPP leader. The July 1994 coup, which ushered the 21-year Jammeh dictatorship, has created an untold stress, misery and hardship for the former officials of the erstwhile PPP government. Many PPP officials were arrested and tortured by the junta. At the Fajura barracks, O.J. Jallow, the former agriculture minister, and others, were held for months without charge. Throughout their detention, the detainees were exposed to degrading treatment by the junta. Guards led by the late Almamo Manet, assembled O.J. Jallow, M.C. Cham, Uzianuji, ex-president Jawara's in-law, Yahya Ceesay and others, and brutally tortured them. O.J. Jallow was completely undressed. M.C. Cham was completely undressed. Uzianuji, Jawara's in-law, was completely undressed. Yahya Ceesay was completely undressed, just to name a few. Our source, who witnessed the torture of O.J. and CO, said he spotted Usainu Darboe, the leader of the opposition United Democratic Party, UDP, among the detainees. Darboe was dressed in a grand mababa at the time. He was suffering from eye pain, Apollo. He was later released from state custody. Darboe was not among those tortured. The title that was given to the PPP officials' detainees prior to the torture sessions commenced was pro-democrats. While the detainees were stripped off naked, petrol was poured on their bodies before the beatings started. The detainees were forced to lie on the ground. The beatings continued unabated. Almamo and his men also poured petrol on a cotton piece, which they inserted into the detainees behind, while a fan was blowing air. It was a pathetic situation. Some of the detainees could be heard crying. Cruelly, 2 The detainees were confined to the Mechanic and Transport Office, MTO, at the Fajura barracks. They were dumped into a car garage warehouse. In the morning hours, Ebrima Krubali would take them for physical training, PT. Ebrima Krubali is now a major with the Gambia Armed Forces. He works at the Joint Services Headquarters in Banjul. Krubali is from Nuemi. O.J. and his fellow detainees were required to make push-ups in order to keep them healthy while under custody, our informant said. As reported earlier, Almamo Manet, now deceased, led the operation to torture O.J. Jallow and the other detainees. Almamo told our source, who happened to witness the torture of the former PPP officials, "If you are not going to partake in the beatings, please leave here." Krubali 1 Michael Seka, alias Duck Eyes, was also among the guards who tortured the detainees. Mike used to work at the State Guard. He was a plain-cloth officer at the time of the beatings. Soldier Sisaho Fati, and 1 Jallow, also participated in the beatings. Sadly, the late Alamamo Manet was shot and killed by soldier Buba Jamet. Both of them came from Nuemi. Buba was a sergeant at the time. He is from Nuemi. Almamo was killed at Sting Corner. Buba Jamet was also at Almamo's burial at the Yundum barracks. He was seen constantly smoking at the burial site. In another development, Corporal Dumbuya, a former state guard, who was implicated in a coup plot, was killed by Amadou Touré, alias Carlos. Carlos used to be a driver at the State Guard. He was a lance corporal at the time of killing Dumbuya. He now works with one of the NGOs in the Gambia. In our subsequent edition, we will discuss Colonel Kasso Camara Bombaredea's involvement in the killing of the Ghanaian sailors in the Gambia, the 2006 March abortive coup, the killing of the April 10 student protesters.